Here, but I want to thank Scott for having me come, everybody else for showing up today, and John and all our dignitaries. So, what I was talking about when I was thinking about this Warwick Affordable School Act is that as elected officials and the politicians in the city, we need more accountability. In terms of how are we going to be able to afford to build schools in Warwick. And I haven't really, seen that accountability in terms of making sure everybody in the city can continue to live and work in the city. And, Mayor Picozzi talked about that in a Warwick Beacon article, that he feared that people could actually be forced to move out of the city because of, building the schools and all the existing spending going on. And, when I read something like that, I said, well, that's very disconcerting to hear something like that. So the thing is, what's the plan so people don't have to move out of the city, especially as senior citizens, people on fixed incomes? And there really isn't any plan. When John went to the first presentation, I actually made up these poker chips. I think I still have like 3 or 4 of them left. And the whole point of making up the poker chips is to symbolize that we're really gambling with people's future. There's a better way to do this, with checks and balances and accountability and stuff like that, to make sure that people are not going to be forced to move out of the city. And that's why I made the poker chip, and I wanted people to realize that there's still time to do this, I believe, a different way. So what preparation has our elected officials taken to prepare for the hundreds of millions of dollars that we're going to need to build these schools? I don't think there's been proper preparation for that. And my problem is that the leaders in the city have created an illusion of sound fiscal policy. That's why I have that, card up the sleeve trick. We spent $8 million in this year's budget, no tax increase. That's almost equivalent to a maximum tax increase we should have had. Last year, we spent $11 million, more than a maximum tax increase, no tax increase. The question is, how do we continue to spend tens of millions of dollars and not raise taxes? I mean, did we dig up a pot of gold and back to City Hall? No. What happened is the federal government's bailed out Warwick with tens of millions of dollars. This is going on probably all through the entire country. It's not only in Warwick. Cranston, I don't know if you've seen the articles in the paper. I think, John, you reported on it. They have major financial problems. We have the American Rescue Plan. We all heard of that. We had the CARES Act. Warwick literally we spent $33.3 million in the last 4 years. So I'm not directing this at any particular administration. This goes back. The things that I've been talking about for 20 years. So $33.3 million in the last 4 years. We didn't raise taxes. We have a massive structural deficit, and I've seen us going back and forth. There's a line item in the budget. We're using $10.8 million of American Rescue Plan money to balance the budget this year. There's another line item for $4 million coming in from the sale of excess property. I think it's a former school. So on paper, we got a $14.8 million. Now the mayor's been saying it's $7 million. I don't have a problem with him saying that, but I want him to justify it. Did we get $7.8 million more in? Or is that just speculation right now? So on paper, we have a $14.8 million deficit. That is a massive deficit. And even if it comes down to 7, let's say they can get to 4 million from the school, and they can get more money from economic development. What they're talking about is economic development coming in, and the massive amounts of revenue coming in. Has it come in? I don't know. But I would like someone to ask that question and find out, where are we right now? Because that is a huge problem in the city when you're planning to spend $350 million in a bond to borrow. I think there's a lot of business people here. I doubt any business people would be racking up this kind of debt if they're going to expand their business and spend tens of millions of dollars on, let's say, an expansion. That's not the way you do it. City leaders, we delayed the property evaluation. Why did we delay the property evaluation? Mayor Picozzi and the city council said people couldn't afford a tax increase. The taxes that are going to increase as a result of this borrowing are so much more times larger than what's going to happen from the revaluation. So how do you justify that? How could you say in one breath, we're not going to do a revaluation because taxes for some people are going to go up too high, but you're proposing spending that's going to dwarf what's going to happen here, right? It doesn't make sense. And I'm going to tell you my opinion. I'm going to be very frank with you people. This was a political game. What's going on next week? It's an election year, right? If that reval came out, it would have woke people up in the city of Warwick. Because the people, I got a house right now, raised ranch. It's assessed at $238. That is so low. I'm anticipating it's probably going to go up by $100,000 next year. They delayed it next year. My taxes are going to probably spike between $200, $300, $400. That doesn't count all the additional spending. So, you know, when we talk about, I don't know if people understand, when you talk about a revaluation, it's revenue neutral. I'm just going to make these numbers. Say we raised, $278 million from taxes. It stays the same, but you get winners and losers. So what's happening, you know, we probably have some real estate people here. I'm no real estate expert, but my home and people are in that kind of sweet spot, the $200,000, $300,000, maybe $400,000 home, where we're going to take the biggest hit. And our taxes are going to go up higher than maybe people in the $700,000, $800,000, whatever, $1,000 home. You know, so that's why it was delayed. I even asked, you know, and I don't want to waste too much time because I'm going to put my little timer on here, but the situation is that they were ready to send out the bills. I did freedom of information. I want to say, why did we delay this? What sections of the city are going to get hit? We never got those answers. So to me, this was nothing more than a political game. Keep people in Warwick asleep. We haven't raised taxes in 4 years. Everything looks great. You know, why in the first time in 20 years, 7 out of the 9 positions in the city council are unopposed. You're an unopposed mayor. I've never seen something like that in 20 years. Why is that? Because people are asleep. Nobody knows what the problems are in the city. School department put out this great presentation, right? They talked about, you know, how it's going to be affordable to, you know, build these schools. When you pay your tax bill, do you write out one check to the school department, one check to the city? You're going to write out one check to build these new schools? No. One check for property taxes. Why can't anybody in the city and the schools tell us what the overall spending is going to be 5 years from now when these schools get constructed? This to me is misleading. You got to talk about and let people know it's not only the cost of the schools, it's the cost of the city and the school budget over the next 5 years. And what did I just talk about? $33.3 million we spent in 4 years with no tax increase. That's an average of about $8.3 million. That's a maximum tax increase every single year. And I've been looking at the budget and studying the budget. There are no reforms going on in the city or the school department to stop that spending. So on top of the tens of millions of dollars you're going to need for new schools, you're going to need more than that just to cover the operating budget for the city and the schools. And so what am I talking about here? Why can't we afford to build new schools? We have no long-term planning. There's no 5-year forecast. I've been asking for 5-year forecasts. If we wanted to do this thing the right way and let people really know what it's going to cost, the city and the school department should have a 5-year plan. We should be able to see what their spending is going to look like over the next 5 years when we build these schools. You can't get that. Well, why did I put that picture over there? I had to actually update this slide. Who lives around the Sandy Lane area? A couple of years ago we had what? Water main break, right? Our infrastructure problems are major in the city. We had the sewer break on, was it Lakeshore Drive recently? The city and the school, the city experts have come in, the water department official. He came in a few years ago and he says when he goes to church every Sunday, he prays that the city of Warwick will have water. Because the infrastructure for water is so old, it's older than the schools that we want to tear down. The sewer infrastructure is so old. We need $200 million, he said, just for water. Where's that planning? There is none. We go along day by day, and I put this thing, crisis of the moment. And there was a famous Jim Hummel of Hummel Report years ago. Mayor Avedition talked about it. We get through year by year. We solve the crisis of the moment. When we don't have money to give out raises, what do we give? More benefits, more holiday pay, right? More sick pay. That's how we solve the problem. We only think a year in advance. It's still going on right now. Trading tomorrow for today. What do we mean by that? Basically, that we live for today, we don't care about tomorrow. For 10 straight years, the school budget was level funded. They consolidated, they cut their budget. They lived off those savings. What did the city do? The city did a massive cut to the school department. I think it was in 2011, 2012. It was a 5% cut. If you remember, Governor Kucheri had this major problem with state aid. They cut all the state aid. What did the city do? They didn't cut spending in the city. They went after the school department. They knocked $6 million off of their budget, made them do a lot of cuts, and all the money went to the city side. Where did it go to? Did we pave our roads? Did we fix our infrastructure? Our recreation facilities are atrocious. No. Went for benefits, retirement benefits. That's where it all went to. We should have had in a kitty, if we had long-term planning, I'd say almost close to $100 million based on what the school department had to do for their savings over those 10 years. We should have had that. And we should have had long-term plans to say, we're going to use that money to build new schools. We're going to use that money to repair schools so they don't fall apart prematurely. But we didn't do that. So what are the other options to finance the schools? This is, to me, a provocative slide. I got an elderly couple here, for sale sign. I've been talking, seniors have been calling me. They're scared to death out of what's going to happen here. They don't get the kind of COLAs and the other kind of benefits and things like that. They're on fixed incomes. Their health care is going up. Electricity's going up. You go to Dave's Market, you buy a bag of groceries, my wife and I. 2 little bags, $50. There's hardly anything in there. This is what people are talking about. And we're gambling with their lives, and it's not right. So what can we do to make our elected leaders find an affordable alternative? That's the whole point of my presentation. And I just want to say this. Opposing the current plan doesn't mean you're against schools. I'm not against schools. I've never been against schools. You know, I ran for the school committee. We need new schools, but you got to do it in a fiscally responsible way. So what I did is I came up with what I call it my Warwick Affordable School Act. It would be legislation that the city council and the school department sign, proposing that they're going to follow guidelines to set their budgets over the next 2 to 4 years so we can afford to build these schools. And this is my saying. I don't think the good fortune of some citizens should be by creating misfortune for other citizens. I know we want what's best for our kids, but we don't need to have a Warwick senior citizen purge. And that's what could happen. So what's the provisions of my act? Reduce the size of city government. I've been studying the budget for 20 years, and I would challenge anybody in this room to tell me there are not ways that we can reduce the size of budget. That $14.8 million deficit needs to be balanced by spending cuts, not new revenue. Because what's going on with the revenue we're going to need for schools and everything else is going to be too much for the taxpayers to handle. We need to reduce the size of our budgets. City and school budget need to be reduced over the next 2 years. And then 2 years after that, we have to set caps. 1% of the overall expenses would come out to about $3.5 million. Do I think this could happen? Probably not. I look at the city council agenda. I look at the potential raises we're giving out. We're spending like crazy. And then we need to develop policies to save on benefit costs. And I'm going to go over these in a second. Councilman Ed Lattisaw has been the guy who's been trying to champion that cause for years. So how would we get $10 million savings in these years? Right now, it's about $235 million we get in property tax money. 42%, almost $100 million, goes to benefits. $100 million. 42%. You know, it's not going to be easy work, but we can get savings out of this. $100 million each year for city and school benefits. And I just want to let you know, Councilman Lattisaw made proposals, mirror, state worker benefit for city employees. He would say $6 million a year. $6 million a year. And now, we're not talking about giving police and fire substandard benefits. They have dangerous jobs. They deserve benefits that are better than what maybe an average citizens get. But we got to start looking at controlling this cost. We have free lifetime health care in the city of Warwick. I don't know if anybody realizes that. At 55, let's say after, there's provisions, there's all kinds of provisions in the contract, but let's say you retired at 55 years of age. I think right now the city might be paying a 20% copay. The day you retire, zero. For the rest of your life. For the rest of your life. Husband and wife, from 55 to 65. That's easily $23,000 a year. 65, you go on Medicare. We pay the Medicare cost, 100%. We pay a supplemental Part B medical cost. Could be $7,000, $8,000 a year. If we had a 25% copay on these retirees, you save $3 million. We can't afford this. We spent $12 million. Free lifetime health care. Guess how much the school department spent? $500,000. Why? Because at 65 years of age, they're off the system. Nobody gets benefits like this. We got to start looking at that. If you want to afford to build schools and update our infrastructure, you got to start looking at this stuff. We have a $300, $600 cap on prescription drugs in the city. Ask a senior citizen how much it pays maybe for 1 or 2 prescriptions. Family plan. Once you hit $600, city pays 100% of the cost. When Mayor Avedisian gave that benefit out over 10 years ago, we never did an actual report. We didn't know how much that was going to cost. We did a Freedom of Information a couple years ago. It's costing about $4 million a year. It's never changed. Caps on pension benefits. We have people in the city, and I do this example, 6 people retired in 2016. They put, let me get this right, they put $750,000, all 6 of them, throughout their entire career. In 20 years, they're going to pull over $11 million out of the pension fund. Is that sustainable? Some of these people will be making $150,000 a year, more money than when they actually worked in the city. Totally unsustainable. These are the kinds of things we got to look at. These things are going to be tough to do, absolutely. But we only have basically maybe 1 or 2 people on the city council that even want to look at this stuff. And what am I doing on time? I want to just make sure I'm good here. I want to just say something yesterday that I heard. Our unfunded liabilities is called OPEB, Other Post-Employment Benefits, free lifetime health care. It's over $400 million. You know what the city's doing? They set up a fund. It's almost like a pension fund. They put $250,000 in it last year. They put $250,000 this year. What the federal government's going to allow the city to do is discount the whole $400 million by 8%. By putting $500,000 in, they're probably going to knock off 100, maybe 125 million. This is my prediction. You're going to see this glamorous report in a couple months from now from the mayor's office. We solved the problem. You didn't solve the problem. It's like putting $20 into a newborn baby's college fund account and thinking in 20 years you're going to have money that they can go to college. It's a total fallacy. It's a Ponzi scheme. Just mark my words and get ready to hear that soon. That's not the way you do it. That's not the way you solve the problem. You don't create this illusion of good fiscal policy. So what are we talking about? School reforms. Schools need to cut their budget. Average cost per student, $22,000 in the city of Warwick. Probably close to one of the highest in the state. Warwick teachers are at or near the highest compensation in the state. I just did, I have a Facebook page called the Taxpayer Spin. I just posted something looking at the averages. Teachers probably averaging $90,000 a year. Other teachers, or other administrators and stuff in $100,000 a year. Go to my Taxpayer Spin page. You'll see all the analysis I've done over the years. We need to take a look at that. And I'm just going to put this out here. And I was on the school committee. I know negotiations can be tough and things. But the school department had experts that came in. Now, this isn't from me. This is from their experts. If we mirrored the Cranston budget, you save $8 million a year. If you mirrored the Cranston budget. If the student-to-teacher ratio mirrored the state average, and I'm not saying it should be a state average, but we need to look at it. Maybe bring it down a bit. We would save $20 million. All I'm saying is there's savings in these budgets that can be realized. So let's go back. I already talked about reducing the size of the government. We need to establish a budget oversight commission. I want to see financial experts come in that are not political in this city and start monitoring the city and the school budget if we want to build schools. And what they're going to do is report quarterly back to us, the taxpayers. The schools in the cities, they're looking at cutting costs. They're on a good path. They're doing it. Let us know that. If that's the case, then what we do is next year, they report back to us. We put the bonds on the ballot again, and we approve them because this independent budget commission says that the city and the schools are making changes. Right now, we shouldn't We should reject this bond issue. There's no controls. Eliminate wide, arbitrary school construction timeline. Why setting this timeline? This is probably one of the worst points in time to take a project like this, with supply chain issues and other kinds of issues. Who's the Speaker of the House? Joe Sacacci, right? Where's he from? Warwick. Who's the head of the Democratic Party in the state of Rhode Island? Joe McNamara. Where's he from? Warwick, right? When that General Assembly wants to pass a law, they'll pass a law. We should immediately be talking to Sacacci and McNamara and put a law together that says, we want this money reserved for Warwick. You heard about the school department, 50% reimbursement, 52%, hundreds of millions of dollars. Great, but let's do it on our timeline, not Ride's timeline, and let's reserve that money for the city of Warwick. First circuit breaker provision, what am I talking about? I just said that a second ago. This Budget Oversight Commission comes in 23-24. Yep, city's on a path to reduce its spending, reduce the deficit. School departments doing provisions to cut their budgets. Let's put a $350 million bond on the ballot for next year. If they can't do that, no bond. And you know what? I want the elected officials to put their blood on the line. If you guys can't control your spending, put a provision in there and let's have state intervention come in and straighten the city out. Accountability. There's no accountability right now. Our elected officials need to put their positions on the line. If you can't control spending, let's call somebody else in to do it. Second circuit breaker, a couple of years after that. So we've done the ballot, the voters approved the ballot, now it goes before the city council, just like yesterday. They released a $56 million bond. Second year, they're controlling their costs, they're cutting their spending. Let's release the bond, let's get the project going. That's the provisions of Affordable School Act. So what I did, I'm going to show you the difference. $300,000 assessed home, this is today's rates now. Next year we're going to have a reval, so that all these numbers go away. So right now, a resident who has a $300,000 home is paying $5,619 in taxes. I want to look at what's going to happen in the next 4 budget years. Current plan, additional expenses in the fiscal year, we'll talk about what the tax increase is going to be. What would happen with my Affordable School Act plan in the tax payment? First year, this is the only estimate that I'm making. Everything else from this analysis comes from official city documents. A June 6th memo from the finance director on the cost of building the schools. I put a conservative $7 million increase in spending each year over the next 4 years. I just told you, over the last 4 years, we increased spending $33.3 million. I'm putting in a conservative $7 million a year. And these numbers are also based on lower interest rates. So this is almost kind of like a best case scenario. $56 million school bond. They just released that yesterday. The city council released it. I think it's going to cost $3 million more per year in principal and interest. This past February, we sold bond for $27 million for the schools, $1.5 million. The principal and interest for those two alone is $4.5 million. That's more than half of our maximum tax increase, just for those bonds. We need to pay down our deficit. All that together, $329 tax increase in that year. Affordable School Act, we reduce our budget, we talked about that. We're still releasing the bonds. We're paying down our deficit, $161 tax increase. We're still going to have to pay taxes in the city, no question about it. The question is, can we manage it so we don't force people out of the city? There's a 2-to-1 difference there. Let's go to next year, $7 million. Phase 1 of the bonds, so now there's different ways that the administration said. I'm going by their memo from June 6th. They said they're going to pay for this over 3 years. There's a lot of questions that haven't been answered. I don't have enough time to even go into that. So I'm going to go by what that June 2nd memo said. The first third is going to come into that fiscal year. We're going to pay down our deficit. $398 tax increase. All right, what's going on with the Affordable School Act? We're continuing to reduce our budgets, right? I talked about that in the second year. Cities cutting their spending. Schools cutting their spending. What's happening? We're getting benefit reform. Remember benefit reforms I talked about? about $3.5 million per year over 3 years to get that $10 million. That's coming in now, and that's helping to pay for the interest on the schools. That's what we call the shared sacrifice, right? Everybody in the city now is contributing. Taxpayers are paying higher taxes. People in the city might be paying higher co-pays. But the fact of the matter is, we're redistributing that money to pay for these schools. Paying down the deficit, $15 tax increase. Let's go to the next year. $7 million, phase 2, eliminate the deficit, $306 increase. Discipline, 1% cap, we said, on the city and school budget. We're limiting how much they can spend. School bond number 2, eliminate the deficit, $44. Final year, $7 million more in spending. Phase 3 of the bond, $301. 1% cap again on spending kicks in. I mean, we can't continue to level fund cities and schools. Expenses go up, right? So taxpayers are going to have to contribute. We're going to have to pay taxes. Phase 3 of the benefit reforms kick in, $8. So let's look at the total. 4-year tax increase for this homeowner, $1,334, 24%. This is based on conservative estimates. It's based on interest rates that are probably lower. When we actually do these bonds, it's going to be a lot higher. So if you look at the Affordable School Act, and if we did this, $228, 4% increase. So what's the total? When you look at the total out of pocket, what you got to remember is that this compounds. You're paying $329. So if I told you, give me $1 today, and for the next 4 years, you're going to give me $1, same, it's $4, right? This compounds. When you compound all that, in 4 years, you're going to pay $3,423 in new taxes. Who's going to be able to afford that if you're an elderly person on a fixed income, with your electric costs going up, right? With your groceries going up? What would happen with the Affordable School Act? $786 over the 4 years. This isn't the perfect plan. I just want people to start thinking. There's different ways to do things. This is, I drew this slide in. I took a family-owned business in Warwick. I'm not going to say what it is. It's a restaurant, right? That last slide I showed you was a residential tax. This is the business tax. It's almost going to be, I think, 31%. In 4 years, they would pay $19,000 more taxes on that business. It's a restaurant. You think maybe they might have to lay some people off, right? Do something? You think the cost of a dinner is going to stay the same? No way. Allow taxpayers a voice. What are we talking about here? We're asleep at the switch. We go to meetings. No one answers questions. There's something on, the school bond. It's called bond anticipation notes. I just learned about this a couple months ago, where anybody in business knows, or if you built a house construction loan, right? It's interest only. They're talking about financing the schools through interest only. That could cost tens of millions of dollars. Where's that going to come from? Is that going to come out of the school bond, right? Or is it we're going to raise taxes higher? There's an underwriting fee that we just found out a month ago of 3% on the $350 million. $11.6 million. Where's that coming from? We haven't been able to get these answers. To me, there hasn't been a proper forum. School department people, city people should be should have had forums throughout the entire city to answer these questions. And they haven't been. And I didn't like the forums that they did with the little easels and things like that. There should have been a 5-year forecast. So, I talked about the little poker chip. Getting back to that. Are we gambling on people's future? That's what we're doing. We're hoping for the best. There's no plan. So we're going to release these bonds. It's going to cost us tens of millions of dollars. The finance director in that June 2nd memo said we could have a possibility of a $50 million deficit by 2027. Now people look at that. What the heck does that mean? Some people can't even imagine what's $1 million, right? What's that translate into the additional taxes? That's the question. We don't have that answer. But I'm going to tell you, it would be a lot of money. So I told people, when you go into the voter vote, take out your little chip. If you don't have a problem with what's been presented, you feel comfortable with the administration and the city official gambling your future, vote yes. But if you vote yes, nothing's going to change. Happy days are here again, spending as usual, right? Voters don't care, the residents don't care. We can spend whatever the hell they want. No one cares. If you say no it's going to send shockwaves through the city. Because now we got a crisis, and I feel bad for the school department. We got to figure out a way to build schools, right? But you're not going to do it by gambling and putting all the risk on the taxpayers. You guys have to have some skin in the game, and you're going to have to figure out a better way to do it. That's the difference we have here. And that's what I'm talking about. A no vote, unquestioned for is about fiscal responsibility, long-term planning, and allowing people to stay in their homes. That's what it's all about. It's not that we're against schools. You're against the non-long-term planning and no accountability. Don't allow elected officials to take a chance and gamble with your livelihood. And that's about all I have. I thought just through a couple other slides in here before I came in today. I just want to show you this. From 2004 to 2020, this is all the new money went to city budget. Look at this. We spent more money on retiree benefits than active employees. If you owned a small business and I told you for every dollar in profit you made, 44 cents has to pay for people that used to work for you that performed services in the past, what would you do? You'd go bankrupt. No one would stay in business with a model like this. But this is what we're doing in the city of Warwick, and nobody wants to talk about this stuff. And I think, maybe that might have been the last one. I thought I had another one. Let me see, I did have another one. I'll have to show you this one. Maybe you can't see it as good, but let me see. Didn't work. Right, let me bring that one back, because I think this is just very important.